Good afternoon and welcome to, I'm pleased to report, a very sunny day in London. Finally, it seems like spring with 22 degrees outside. And welcome to the latest in my video conversation series. I've always been interested, as part of my personal and professional development, in the benefits that come about when we challenge ourselves or come out of our comfort zone. From this interest, my business Noodle was born. I get a great sense of pride seeing how people grow and develop when they challenge themselves to something they've never tried before or thought they could do. I've been developing this to help people in their working life, and particularly leadership roles, to see how they can stretch their horizons and become more resilient. Never was there a time that tested our resilience more than with COVID-19. I've been delivering a series of discussions and webinars with people I admire for the skills and techniques they use to develop people, and to see how we can adapt some of these to use in our everyday lives to improve our resilience, motivation, communications, amongst other things. Today I'll be talking to Joe and Laura Mearns. They're the owners of Greenrock, an adventure, travel and challenge event company that specialises in cycling in remote areas. Like many of us, they've had to reinvent their company during the pandemic and are now looking to make bikes for adventure cycling designed from their decades of experience to help others create their own adventures. I've known Joe and Laura for over 10 years from working together on charity challenge events, including the London to Brighton 100k walk for Blind Veterans UK, and an adventure and survival challenge that we did for the Tesco charity partners, amongst others. I've also had the pleasure of travelling with Joe as part of a regional team cycling challenge across the Andes. Both he and Laura are avid adventurers and embody a real entrepreneurial spirit and ability to adapt. So good afternoon, Joe and Laura. How are you doing?
Hi, good, thank you. Very well.
Great to see that background and sort of embracing that cycling mode. I think you said it's like a bike graveyard or something.
It is. All the bikes are as old as we are. Myself.
Well, also giving a nod to that, I thought I'd go a little drift from what I normally wear. I'm wearing a cycling top from our Andes adventure, just sort of like, you know, bringing back that Argentinian vibe from those days when we could travel, which seemed like a lifetime ago.
Yeah, very odd.
We'll get some red wine and continue the vibe.
What was I going to say? So you are, remind me, because I've done a lot of these series from all over the UK and actually internationally. So if you tell us about where you are at the moment, and I think you're looking to be living somewhere else, actually, without going into too much detail about that pain.
Yes, it's true. It's true. We're trying to, in the theme of challenges, we're trying to make our life more challenging by moving to Spain from Malvern, or the Malvern Hills. So that's where we are at the moment, as you say, on this lovely sunny day. We're hoping to, by mid-May, we've sold the house. By mid-May, we've got to be out of here and somehow or another find our way to Spain. I think.
Good luck with that. It seems like, yeah, just to add to your challenge, I'm sure that is a very difficult thing in any time, let alone now. So if we'll kick off a little bit. So I've got a series of questions I want to ask you guys. So if you can tell us a bit more about your background and what got you into the world of adventure and challenge events.
You go first, Susie? You go.
I think for me, I was always terrible at sports at school, so I just didn't do anything like that. And then in my 20s, I think I went on a charity bike ride challenge, and I found going up a hill that actually really enjoyed cycling uphill. And I remember being on this charity challenge and seeing a couple kind of coming past me with panniers on and thinking, wow, that is the way to do it, with the independence of the panniers and not being in a group and all the rest of it. And so it went from there. I just started very small. I think I was in Oxford at the time, and I used to cycle just going to London, then I took myself to Wales, then I flew out to France and did a little ride in the Alps. But I came from a background of being somebody that just didn't do sport, was rubbish, you know, last one picked for a team. But through finding all of this, I kind of found in myself, I found something that I really enjoyed and was good at, and gave me that kind of independence and confidence as well. And it was just baby steps from you know, just cycling from my back door basically, and it grew from there.
That's great. I think that resonates with a bit of my own story and other people I know. Cycling does give you that, doesn't it? And it's the independence it gives you.
Yeah.
It's really nice. Likewise, you know, team sports for me were always a bit of a nightmare at school, and thinking, I'm going to be the last pick for that rounders team or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. It's finding your own space in it, I think, and then realizing there's a kind of space to be to be good at it as well.
Also, we'll just sort of let everyone know that we've got a little visitor in the background who's your daughter Rosie, who is being very well behaved. So I think every one of these calls needs to have a little person or a pet or an animal coming in, so that's all good.
It's not a Zoom call in the pandemic if there isn't a small person upstaging everybody.
Oh, well done, Rosie. Joe, do you want to tell us what got you into this?
Yeah, so with me, it was it's sort of similar in nature, I guess. I struggled with asthma when I was a child, and in sort of all the school environments that I was in, I had quite a hard time. And I found initially through swimming and then through cycling that these things not only improved my health and my consultant at the time was sort of thrilled that I was doing the sports and it was increasing my lung capacity, but also that it started to give me confidence in myself, which is what was sort of lacking because of the ill health. And when I got to sort of my late teens, I'd done a bit of cycling, and then my mum was director of Marie Curie Cancer Care at the time, so I decided to put together this challenge, cycling from Warsaw in Poland via Paris back to London for the charity back in 1990. And that was my first long distance bike ride, that's 1,200 miles. And that created not only the formula for the future, but it gave me sort of boundless confidence. And I thought I just wanted to pass that on to other people. So from there, I then went off and did, cycled across the Himalayas in '92 and carried on this sort of this need for challenge to help sort of improve myself and make myself feel happy.
Yeah, I was going to say that does bring me on to the next question, which is how have you used that? I mean, you seem to be at the forefront of those sort of charity bike rides, actually. And then what was it that you thought, made you want to sort of pass that on to others? Was it the sort of feeling or what was it about that?
Yeah, it was really, I mean, it was literally the fact, I sort of came out of all these things so long, not just the overall event of, finishing and sort of all that brings for you, although there is a sort of, as we all know, a sort of a disappointment in every finish that is ended. But it's just the day-to-day thing, though, when you're on your bike all day and the freedom and the sort of all those endorphins raging around your body and feeling so great at the end of the day, and the lack of guilt about eating and drinking and it's just a great feeling to have in your life, and you realize that confidence is the sort of key ingredient to life. It doesn't really matter how academic you are and various other things. If you're confident, then almost anything's achievable. And not having had that as a child and then discovering it as a sort of a young adult and then an adult, I just wanted to share that feeling with everybody, and hopefully that they would experience the same thing and be able to feel like anything was possible in life all of a sudden, rather than nothing is possible.
Yeah, that's it. Focus on the things you can do. I think it's interesting you say about the asthma connection, because I remember before we did the Andes trip when all sorts of panicky thoughts were going through my mind, and one of them was, I remember saying to you, "Did you know I've got asthma?" And you said, "Well, that's fine. Then you're probably used to breathing with less oxygen. It's probably an advantage." So yeah, it's good to sort of, especially if you've been used to growing up and that sort of thing and challenging yourself, it's great to have that sort of outlet and think, no, focus on the positives. Anything's possible. So I think if we go on to resilience, I think the dictionary definition of resilience is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties or toughness. Well, having worked with you and travelled with you on one of your challenges, I would definitely describe both of you as resilient. Can you give an example of a time that you feel illustrates this resilience?
You go first.
Well, there's a very recent example. We're meant to be buying this house in Spain, which was all, in contract and all the rest of it. And we were in the Spanish consulate on Friday to get our paperwork to buy the house. And on Saturday morning, this is with us moving out of our house in 6 weeks' time with our children and a dog, we get an email to say the people selling the house have pulled out of the sale. So we know we now find ourselves imminently homeless, and with a question mark over if we can even get into Spain to try and find a new house with 6 weeks to go. So I think we're living resilience today.
Yeah. But you had it in the Himalaya by bike with your, sort of a solo woman in the Himalayas, Muslim countries and everything else. So.
Yeah, tell us more about that, Laura. Because I think
yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure that was resilience though, because I felt, this sounds sort of counterintuitive, but I really felt, certainly in Pakistan, that traveling on my own as a female was actually an advantage, because the women I met that having the worst time of it were sort of European women who were there with a male companion, because then they truly kind of got the brunt of feeling like a woman, whereas for me, people had to treat me like a man because there was no man to talk to. So
that's interesting. Give us a little bit of to the backstory to that. How long ago was it? Because you were a bit ahead of your time with this one, really, and you were doing a
this was 2005. I was in Pakistan. Wow. I was very lucky. I mean, I cycled past, I didn't know it at the time, obviously, but I cycled in Abbottabad. I cycled past where Osama bin Laden was hiding, where they found him. And I knew there was like a funny feel about the place, but obviously I had no idea quite how,
yeah. Well, I mean, that's pretty impressive, isn't it? And you wrote a book off the back of that, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. Well, that took determination, actually, if you're kind of talking about sort of like a quality of character. I'd say the cycling in the Himalayas was the easy part. It was actually sitting down to finish a book that
okay, well, maybe that's something we'll come on to in Tenacity. That sounds like that. That's amazing. And so, well, what do you think? You're obviously living through this in the pandemic. Is there something in your experiences, whether they've been cycling or during the current situation, that you think we can learn from in the current pandemic and make ourselves more resilient?
Yeah, definitely. I think from the things Laura was saying that we've experienced, and some of the things I've experienced running trips, and as you well know, sort of in the trips and events industry, you're often placed in a difficult situation very quickly and have to resolve it very quickly. And that teaches you to be pretty resilient when it comes to stress, I think. And the pandemic, I think, sort of goes to that exactly. This is for a lot of people, a very stressful time. And if you're not used to having anxiety or stress in your life or in your workplace, then I can only imagine that this has been a horrendous time for a lot of people who it's all relative to everybody, and who are not used to that. So it's much more difficult for them to cope with. I think for the likes of us, and speaking about the three of us here, I think because of our backgrounds and what we do, we're already sort of armed to deal with a lot of that stuff, and to sort of internalize it all and deal with it and sort of move forward and sort of count our chickens. But there's so many people, I think, who don't have that, and that they need the help to sort of understand how they feel about what's going on, and to understand, when going back to the confidence thing, that it will all be okay, and that if you can dig deep within yourself, find that confidence, find that optimism, then there's always something positive to look forward to and to create. And that's what we need to help people do.
It's to learn the tools, isn't it, to help you handle these stressful situations, like to be able to kind of recalibrate very quickly, what's important, what you need to let go and move on from, what you need to concentrate on, how to make the most positive outcome from the situation you now find yourself in. And again, it's kind of just learning these techniques, I suppose, to help you navigate your way through a very difficult situation.
You're almost at an advantage if you've had to deal with some terrible things in your life before. No one wants to deal with terrible things, but if you've had them before, it gives you the coping mechanisms in a situation like this. And I think of just a very quick one that Denise was a part of, going back to the Andes trip. There's a couple on that trip, and in Cafayette when one of them collapsed in a restaurant and had to go into hospital for the night. And basically, it turned our whole trip round, and the objective we had in our mind sadly slipped away, and then we had to reorganise the whole trip via a completely different part of the Andes, which was hundreds of kilometres away, and was very difficult to organise on the hoof immediately with no mobile reception and everything else. And then we lost, of course, another cyclist who decided to go back to the UK the very next day. So but we were all resilient in that situation, and we all rolled with the punches and got on with it and made the best of it. And I think it's experiences like that in our past that help us with what's going on now. But for the people who don't have that, it's got to be very difficult.
Yeah, I agree. I think we can only sort of see the positive in that. Okay, once we've gone through this, that it might make us, the ones of us who didn't have that in our sort of armory before, will come out of it maybe a bit more resilient afterwards and able to handle future things. But when you give that example of the Andes, I kind of use that in parallel with a little bit with what's going on just now, because if we'd known that we'd have to travel for 3 days in one direction to then backtrack for 3 days and come back again in advance, you'd have probably gone, no, I'm not doing that. But a bit like this, if we'd known a year ago that we were going to be in the same situation a year on, you'd have probably found it quite hard to cope with. But because it happens as we go along, then you just have to adapt to it, don't you? It's the same sort of scenario. Yeah.
I think it should be COVID's strapline. Sort of, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Yeah.
I think if anything with this one is that in our situations in the past, we've always been in some sort of control, i.e. we're making the decisions. And I think what is very difficult about this for everybody, including us, is that we're sort of under the control of a government whose messaging is so vague that we don't really know what's going to happen from one day to the next. And that if you're used to being in control is really hard to deal with.
And there's no time definition to it. You can't say to yourself, it's all right, in 2 weeks this will be done. Who knows when this is going to end?
I know it's true. And you hit the nail on the head there. I think there's a double-edged sword being an events person, isn't it? You kind of are used to stress, but the same token, you like to be in control, and that is a big challenge for me, I must say. I'm kind of completely out of control. If we speak about normal times, I know challenge is a huge part of your life and something you embrace and love to share with others. What would you say has been the most challenging event or expedition you've been on, and what did you learn from the experience?
Okay, I'll go first. There's quite a few to choose from, but I would say it was, funny enough, it was in a developed country. So it was a San Francisco bike ride, and the tour agents that we'd used to do the bookings for the bike rides and meet all the ATOL regulations, what have you, we'd used them before, but on that particular trip, right from the beginning, I didn't feel quite comfortable about how the trip was going, the hotel bookings and everything seemed a bit vague. Some of the hotels didn't seem quite sure if they'd been paid. Anyway, long story short, as this trip unraveled, it sort of culminated with the hotel we used in Santa Monica. I'd done the worst thing you can do possible when you're running the trips, is I'd relaxed that morning thinking we'd pulled off the impossible and got this group of 55 cyclists from Ireland, heavy drinking cyclists from Ireland, and all their bikes that broke every 5 minutes to the end of the ride. And I got a call. The first thing was I got a call from one of the cyclists who had come off and had a concussion. And so I thought, it was a shame, but I thought, well, at least that's the last drama of this particular bike ride, which had dramas every day, out of the way, and we'll get to the hotel, I'll get them in there, get them down to the pub, and we're done. But then I got another call when I was in Malibu, on the way to Santa Monica, to say the luggage vehicle just got to the hotel, and no one was booked into the hotel. There was no booking, and the hotel was full. And so I had 55 cyclists en route to the hotel who are looking forward to doing a lot of drinking and with nowhere for them to stay. And so I got to the hotel as quick as I could, spoke to the hotel next door, which was terrible place. There's a travel lodge we're usually booked into, but the hotel next door was a proper sort of drug den, and did a deal with them. They also knew that we were in a hard, difficult place. They charged me thousands and thousands of dollars. Eventually found the tour operator who was supposed to be in LA to see us, but was still in the UK asleep, and he made lots of excuses. Turned out he booked another hotel right on the other side of Los Angeles, so I had to put them all in cabs, send them over there, pretend everything was okay. Actually, we took to the pub first while we sorted stuff out, and then send them in cabs over there. Then the other hotel wouldn't give him money back, and then we got into that hotel. They wouldn't check them in because he hadn't paid them, and it went on and on and on. And it was, it was a gift they kept giving for quite a few weeks afterwards, actually. But that was as far as challenges go for me. It's not cycling up a big pass or something. It's trying to deal with lots and lots of people's expectations and trying to make sure someone's got a bed for the night, basically, on that occasion.
And I guess as well, I mean, one of my biggest anxieties when I'm dealing with events is, it's the other people, it's the third parties you're dealing with, isn't it? Like you said there, we know what we can control and we're very thorough about everything. And you just like to think that everybody lives up to the same expectations as you and has the same standards, but not always the way.
No, he was going bankrupt in the background, but he didn't tell us. And that's what had happened. So it was... so it just made it impossible to sort out at the end. One of the guys got to the airport. He stayed on for a few days, and he got to the airport and he rang me and said, "I've just gone to check in for my flight, and there isn't one." So we had to sort that out. And under those, obviously, that's the tour operator side of things. But he was, at that point, utterly useless. So, that's when it's properly stressful, when you've got all those people and you've got minutes to sort something out, basically.
Yeah. What about yourself, Laura? Is there anything that you can think of from like your trip, maybe in Pakistan?
I was just thinking I've had it really easy because it was just me, so it didn't matter kind of what I got wrong. If I went hungry, I went hungry, but I didn't have like 20 people looking at me going, "When's supper? Where are we going to stay?"
But there was the 100k walk or Isle of Man CC weather.
Yeah, the weather on the Isle of Man is always a challenge, but again, you can't control that, so you just have to that is when we have to roll with the punches. But I mean, I remember like certainly when I was cycling across the Himalayas, a lot of it you don't know what's coming up around the corner. You don't know when you'll find food. You don't know when you'll find somewhere you can sleep and all the rest of it. And you also don't know what the road surface is about to do, because you can be kind of rolling along on something that looks like a road, and all of a sudden, the river's taken it out, or you're cycling on rocks or whatever. And there weren't elevation profiles or anything like that. So, I had no idea kind of what the next 50 kilometers were going to throw at me. But I do remember kind of cycling along, and kind of these kind of little mantras would come into your head, wouldn't they, when you kind of on your own on your bicycle. And life's very simple when you're on your own on your bicycle. But I do remember thinking it's only hard until it gets harder, because it always got harder, which made what you'd just done look easy.
Yeah, that's a good phrase. I think we totally underplay it, because lots of people that be watching this, would be thinking, well, a woman cycling on her own, undertaking that challenge. So many people are all over social media at the moment doing those sorts of things, and now it's
very different.
Oh, I just got on my bike and got on with it.
It was much simpler then. Yeah, it was brilliant. I didn't have to think about having a phone to charge or an Instagram, followers to an appetite to sate. Yeah, exactly. Just do my thing.
Very true. Very true. I've spoken a lot about how I believe the more we introduce small challenges into our lives, the more resilient we become. And you obviously work with a range of people when you're developing these challenges. How do you manage to identify their goals, to challenge them to just the right level? And a sort of second part to that question is, what positive effects have you seen as a result of this? Maybe how it impacts on someone's wider life.
As far as the first part of the question, I think we all know that if we're sitting down with charity as a client, something like that in particular, then it's not very often they get it right as to what the people's abilities are and the level of the challenge. And that's the bit that we all work hard on trying to organise so that the right challenge is in place, because from one side, whoever the client might be, they're looking at the bottom line and as much income as possible, which is fair enough, and they often don't have a very good idea of the clients and what it takes to do certain things, and then we get left sort of holding the baby on the ground, because we end up with people who've come on a alpine coal bike ride and have had a quadruple heart bypass 3 months before or something, and it doesn't often fit, but they've raised some money, so they know it's all good the other end. So actually designing things for people that fit the bill, so everybody gets what they want and the challenge is right. Looking at the clients, looking at the audience they have, having an understanding of what people are into at the time and what realistically people can do, because we're all guilty of thinking that we can do a bit more than we can sometimes.
No, some people are the opposite.
Especially if you were fit in the past, and maybe just working life and life in general, families and that sort of stuff. You've lost a bit of that fitness, but you still have in the back of your mind that you still do these things, but they're quite a lot harder when you try and do them later, and then we end up bearing the brunt of that on the road. So it's just to design some things that meet as wide a marketplace as possible, so as many people can take part as possible and can glean as much benefit from it. And that's tricky. It just depends on whether it's a one-day mass participation thing or if it's a long haul sort of high altitude challenge, and then the audience is very different, and we need to be very careful about who we get on there. I hope I haven't strayed from the point too much.
It's got to do with the individuals, because then it is simply a question of having the conversation. So there's sort of talking to them about kind of what they want from it, what they see for themselves, and then there's also the reading between the lines. And like you were saying, sometimes there can be a bit of sort of ego involved, and people will think they possibly can do more than might be the doctor might want them to. Yeah. And then you have other people that simply underplay themselves, and they until they do something, they don't believe they can actually do it. You definitely have, there are definitely both types.
These was off down the road in the Andes, 1,000 mile an hour.
I was going to say, don't use me as the example. Have you seen anyone who has sort of surprised you, or you think, is that other end where they've said, so I can't do that, I'm not sure I can do it, and then the positive impact will come out of it?
Yeah, well, I remember having a break on Mont Ventoux when we were going up it, thinking we were good at climbing mountains, and it was a hot day, so we were telling ourselves, we'll just have a rest in the shade for a moment, being these kind of real cold climbers that we are, and then we were out of shape. And then a man went past us on his bicycle with one leg.
Yeah, it's a German guy who just had one leg and was powering up this huge leg, massive leg.
Yeah, he had one mega leg.
Yeah, but I can over the years, there's always people on every single trip that surprise you, and my without exception, the people I'm a fan of every time are the people at the back, the people who really didn't think they could do it, who when they signed up for it were terrified, and when they landed and you sort of saw them and briefed them before you start at the hotel, you can barely speak for nerves, and then they get into it, and after the first day they're sort of euphoric, and then they have to get into the grind of it if it's a multiple day trip after that, and sort of just make their way through it. And often I'm, many times I've been at the back on my bike supporting them, and they're the people that I think are just amazing. And it's very easy for someone who's sort of a gym bunny or something, comes out on one of the long haul trips, and it's just it's just their fitness. They're just sort of tarmacs there for the majority of it. But it's the people at the back who are fighting all sorts of demons.
Mm.
It really makes a huge change to them. As this goes to the second part of your question, I guess. When they finish, I've seen they've changed their lives completely, from changing their jobs to changing where they live to leaving their partners. Yes, some of them have met new partners on the trips and left their partners, but they've made huge fundamental changes. But it's only ever the people really towards the back, and they and that whole sort of whole style of event has changed quite a lot in the last 15 years or so, I guess. As it's become more and more popular and more normal to do these things, and more advertised through social media and what have you, it's become less. All that stuff's lessened the impact on people, and so they don't tend to make such big changes now as they used to.
That's interesting. I know that phrase you used, tarmac starer, always makes me laugh. And you warned me before our trip as well, don't be one of those. It's like, no, I mean, you do have to, you're on those adventures of a lifetime, and you really have to be looking around you, don't you? Not just looking down at the road in front of you. You miss such a missed opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely.
So talking about the adventure side of things, and I know you've personally been on and also created some inspiring adventure events. Can you tell us about a couple that stand out for you as ones that you're especially proud of or that you particularly enjoyed?
I think as a sort of one that I think I didn't expect to well, I haven't done it, funny enough, but we designed it and we run it. And in doing so, we've sort of learned quite a few things that were a surprise. But the Race Across Europe, which is an ultra cycling event, which, we're not ultra cyclists, and we thought that there's a race across America, so why is there a race across Europe? Because in our humble opinion, we think that Europe's a much more fascinating and diverse continent. So we put that together, very similar to Race Across America, 3,000 miles, but it passes through 6 countries. And since we've been running that, and it's a tiny event, and it's virtually impossible to keep growing it, it's taught us all sorts of things. I think we were quite the tarmac staring thing. I mean, that really sort of that defines the people on that sort of event. So we were a little bit cynical about the whole thing, only to find out that we've met the loveliest cyclists, incredibly supportive, and we've had new friends across Europe through this particular event. And also what it's done for people is of the few people who have taken part, it has changed some of their lives, and they've done some extraordinary things. Even the German guy, young guy, Fritz Geers, who has the solo record, supported, he turned out he struggled quite a bit with depression and things, and the Race Across Europe really sort of helped him with that. He went back and changed his lifestyle and set up a brand making sort of healthy granola, and completely different sort of path to the one he was on, and and is much happier. And then he won the Race Across Germany, and etc. etc. But it's really been that's been a revelation without actually physically sort of challenging ourselves in how people, just how great people are and what a great community you can develop, and that's what the Race Across Europe is now. It is a community.
Give us a idea of that, just to remind us again of the distance and what time that chap you're talking about did it in.
So it's 3,000 miles, just shy of 3,000 miles. And Fritz, so he did the solo supported version, and I have to pull a time out of my head, but I think it was 11 days.
Wow.
He got it at night, so it must have been 11 days, 20 something hours, I think.
Oh goodness, yeah, that's something else.
That event truly is sort of testament to the human character. I mean, Paul Pierce, who lost his passport in Italy. I mean, all kinds of things happen to these people that they have to bounce back from and get on the bike, utterly sleep deprived, and all the rest of it. And they still have a sense of humour.
Yeah, no, they are. It is the thing that, and it's a strange. Everybody who does it sort of ends up as a friend, as a part of this community.
Yes.
Every single person who's done it's still in touch with us now.
So supportive of each other, not just within the teams, but everybody who takes part or is involved in the event. There's a huge feeling of camaraderie about it.
There is, yeah.
Oh, I love that. That's great. What do you think that is that draws us as individuals to adventure, and why do you think it's so important for our development?
I think it's being out of your comfort zone. It's the stretch, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I think the learning the coping mechanisms. Just life becomes easier once you've allowed yourself to be challenged. I think the only problem is that it becomes, or can become, quite addictive, and then you need to have a challenge. And then there's also a tendency to turn everything in your life into a challenge, like buying a house in Spain. So you just everything. You rather than just thinking I'll sit on the turbo trainer for 6 hours and challenge myself there, all of a sudden you think, well, how difficult can I make my life so that it's a constant challenge?
I like it. Yeah, that is. You're right. It does become a little bit addictive, doesn't it? But it must be difficult as well for people who thrive on, like yourselves, travel as well and restrictions at the moment. So I mean, it's amazing what a year it's been for a business that specialised in creating amazing global adventure events. How do you think people's attitudes are going to change, in your opinion, going forwards? Are we going to be more desperate for adventure or more cautious? What sort of trends do you see?
I think from what we've seen, sort of questions being asked over the last year or so, I think both of us have seen that there's like an enormous, like a volcano of pent-up demand, that people are so desperate. We've got a one of the things that most curious on Facebook, one of our pages is the highest bike ride in the world, which is the Manali Leh bike ride. It's a sort of fairly grand title. It's not technically true, but it's that at the moment, the Facebook sort of reports that come through, the amount of people looking at that page a day is extraordinary, and I think it's this sort of vicarious travel at the moment. But I think that there's just people are desperate to get out and do stuff, and once travel's easy to do, which, as we were saying earlier on, is really difficult with all the testing at the moment. When it's easier to do, I think people are going to go berserk and head off with their furlough money and
their Zwift legs.
And we're also strong from Zwift, because there's no downhilling on that app. It's a nightmare.
We need to make it real. We need like a Zwift-a-thon event.
I wish you could freewheel on Zwift. It's exhausting.
Yeah, the downhills on Zwift are what appealed to me, as you know what I'm like on downhills. I'm a bit like you, Laura, and the uphills, I'm like, yeah, bring it on. Downhills in the real world, I'm a bit like, oh. Whereas this is great, I could go like this. It's interesting what I've seen people talking about with cycling events or challenge events, and everyone seems to now want to go to Scotland. And I'm like, right, you're not all going there and filling my country with your cycling. It's tricky to get the balance right. So once we go on to tenacity, would you describe yourself as tenacious, and could you give us an example of when you've had to really embrace grit and determination to achieve something?
Sorry with this episode. Here's Rosie. For those who watch. She's trying to be quiet. She's whispering, but we can't hear now. Tenacity, tenacity, I think, from as we all know, from starting at the bottom of a long climb with sort of 40 or 50 kilos on your bike, and then just putting your mind to the fact that you're going to keep going and not stop until you get to the top, wherever it might be. And then tenacity with trying to buy a house during a pandemic in another country, or I think there's lots of. So I think being tenacious, it's definitely part of my character, and I think it has to be part of Laura's. But maybe you think not.
No, I think I am.
Yeah, you are tenacious. Yeah.
Again, you underplay yourself, Laura, there with the and then speaking about the Himalayas, and you're like, oh you must have remembered some tough times from then when you think, oh, why am I doing this? Or should I think but I'm always intrigued by I remember when the first year of the London Marathon, the expo where they sell you everything, and I've caved into the T-shirt which had London Bridge on it that says, "And what hurts more, to continue or to stop?" Is that the sort of thing that goes through your mind if you maybe sort of feeling it's tough?
I don't know. I was just thinking, kind of, what is tenacity? I was thinking it's sort of that insistence of having faith in something, even when you don't know the outcome.
That's a good way of putting it, definitely.
Yeah, because it's what
you're definitely
what it feels like.
Yeah, you're definitely tenacious, and it is that thing where you, once you're in something, whatever it might be, even writing a presentation or something, that all of a sudden, I think if you're tenacious, you don't have the ability to give up.
Yeah.
You may consider it momentarily, but as soon as you consider it, you realise that you have to reach the end of whatever it is, and that, I think, is that's when the tenacity really kicks in, and you because you know that you'd just be utterly disappointed in yourself if you give up.
Yeah, I think it's just kind of a wholehearted commitment. If you've committed to something kind of wholeheartedly, you can't give up. You know, your heart's set on it, so that's
it feels like you've broken
you will
something.
do what it takes.
Yeah. I feel like I've broken something if I give up. I can't. I've never not completed a bike ride, and if the day that happens, then I'll have broken the whole of the bike ride thing. So for me, you have to find a way to do it. Come what may.
I think, and tenacity is, I think we're all a bit humble about that, because it's usually something that other people say about us rather than we say about ourselves. So I think that's why it's hard sometimes to recognize it or, give examples, because if you're of that mindset, you probably do it a lot without really thinking about it as well.
Yeah.
We've possibly touched on this before, but I don't know if anything else comes to mind when we talk about tenacity. And I was saying it's easier to recognize it in other people. Are there any examples that have come to mind about somebody who's really kind of pulled out of the bag that you've seen?
Well, the race across Europe, guys.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but on to be honest, on lots of, even like the 100K walk, for instance. I mean, there was some really tenacious people there who were in pieces, sort of halfway down the road, and then despite the blisters and everything else that they were suffering from, there was nothing that would stop them reaching the finish. And I know we've all seen that in the challenge events, and it's borne out across pretty much all the things that we do. There's always someone fighting something, whether it's physical or mental or both, and they will not give up. And sometimes their inability to give up causes quite a trouble, because you're trying to manage the rest of the group when they
some long days.
when they won't give up. But I mean, it really is a testament to the human spirit, the things you see in what the three of us do.
Yeah, I think that just reminded me of a bit like the event that inspired me to sort of do the London to Brighton walk with you guys, was the event in Scotland that I did, Caledonian Challenge. And I remember having done it myself and thinking, right, that is hard. But then when the people were doing it on the actual day, there were people that we knew of these cut-off times, and you have to try and stick to them as much as you can as an event organizer. But I remember someone being like 10K from the end, and they were practically going backwards, and you think it's so difficult to make that call for somebody else, because you think that they're actually not going to finish, making the thing unsafe. But then you can see the kind of determination in them, and how upset and gutted they'll be if they don't finish. And that's a hard call, isn't it?
Yeah, very. Yeah, we had one of those in the London to Brighton over and I helped. I forgot her name. I helped her across the line for the last mile, sort of thing. I sort of helped her do the last mile, but she wouldn't, and that was outside the cutoff and everything. But we're the same as you. We didn't care, and it's the same with the race across Europe. We set generous finishing times, so to allow as many people to try it as possible, on a realistic basis. Don't have to be elite athletes, and to be honest with you, even if they were going to be another day longer, I'd still be there to see them in.
That's great attitude. That's what I love about working with you. we're going to come on to the big buzzwords of the moment are mental health and well-being. I mean, we're all out of our comfort zones just now. We spoke at the top of the conversation about how mental health is suffering and we're having to deal with different levels of stress, yourselves included. So what impact do you think the restrictions, especially around movement and travel, have had on people's mental health over the past year?
I think it can have had some positive impacts. I think it depends how you approach it, but it can make you grateful for what you have.
And I think
a lot of people, I think, have appreciated sort of being able to stay home. Extra hours in the day that aren't spent commuting.
But I think, and also, I know from some of the local people around us who've lived here for a long time, they've all of a sudden discovered footpaths which just outside their house pretty much, which they've never been down. So I think people have really learned to appreciate what's on their doorstep, rather than looking so much further afield. But but at the same time, I know that there's a lot of frustration around. I think it's just that feeling that your civil liberties have been taken away, and I think it's maybe more to do with that than actually traveling to sort of Africa or Asia or something. It's more about feeling like you're being constrained by this invisible force, and there's nothing you can do to fight against it. So it's an invisible force and it's an invisible disease, and everything's invisible. So there's no. I think that must be that makes it difficult to sort of work out in your mind, and it must be quite a battle on the days that you're not feeling positive about where you live and it's raining and it's windy and all the things we've had to endure through the winter here.
Yeah, or you're stuck in a small urban flat with all the children.
Yeah, I mean, we're extraordinarily lucky, but I can't imagine, being in the middle of Birmingham or somewhere in a high rise, with 4 kids as a single mum or something.
Yeah.
That must be just, I don't know how they do that. Personally, I think we should arrange an event for all of those guys, and we should get them all out and for free, and they should have a nice time.
Yeah.
So that would be good.
That's it, we're embracing the positives. That's all I love. You only spoke about it very briefly at the very top of the call, but obviously it's a massive part of what your business has been. I'm intrigued to know how you're adapting though with your new adventure bike.
So yes, as you know, I had another business partner, Gabe, who when we living and working in China, and he came over here last February from China, and where he was still living, and we went off and did a bit of stuff in Snowdon. That was right at the beginning of the pandemic. The YHA there was just closing down on us, and so Gabe's got stuck here, and so we've been doing our normal sort of entrepreneurial stuff, which started out with us sourcing PPE, which then we realised that you only get that contract if you are a friend of Boris Johnson. So even though we had a lot of experience in that field, and then that moved on to other things. Amazon, we thought, well, Amazon FBA, that's the way to go because everybody's shopping online, and we have done some of that, and that's helped us keep moving forward. But at the core of all this, we wanted to work out how we could do, what have we done in the past that we could create something for that's sort of pandemic proof for us, because the type of businesses that we're talking about here are the worst affected by the pandemic pretty much. So we thought, well, all the years of looking after people on bikes and traveling with our bikes and our luggage and everything else and all that we've learned, perhaps we should put that into designing bicycles that are for adventure cycling and for bike packing, that sort of thing. So that's exactly what we've done. So where we used to live in China, we know the guys out there well who make the bikes. So we're going to make titanium frames in China. We're not very comfortable with our carbon footprint on that, so we'll try and offset that. And once we get rolling and we're confident about cash flow, we'd like to bring the fabrication into Europe for that, to eliminate the carbon footprint. And we're designing luggage as well, so we can offer everybody a package. Basically, the strap line of the website is sort of our experience, your adventure, and that's sort of how we see it, that we're going to use everything that we've learned and some stuff from my engineering background with the boats and stuff to design bikes that are really fun, that will take you somewhere on adventure, but you can take your luggage off and then you can go do some single track or whatever. And so they're sort of multi-purpose bikes, but specifically designed to take you traveling and experience the world on two wheels. So that's where we're going with it all at the moment.
Excellent. I can't wait. You're looking for any testers?
No, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. You got the gravel bike for you, I think, Denise. Well, you have a mountain bike to test, if you prefer.
Right, anything. Oh, it's so So I am going to ask you if there's a top sort of tip to take away you'd like to leave us with at the end of this conversation.
Top tip.
I
think with all we've been talking about, I think if you've got something you want to do, don't hesitate. Sorry, don't feel like you can't do it. Don't hesitate. Just do it. It's life is short, and if you don't at least have a go, you'll regret it.
And don't take it too seriously.
Yeah, go for it. Whatever it is, go for it. It doesn't matter.
Good tips, good tips. And of course, the other, I don't know if you saw my final bit that I like to round off these conversations with. Is there a song that sums up how you're feeling, or some sort of motivational little ditty?
So the song for me would be Dancing in the Moonlight, Top Loader.
Perfect. And what does that particularly remind you of?
That reminds me of, I bought this boat in Belgium and put it on the Thames by Tower Bridge, Butler's Wharf area, and I used to behave very badly back then, have a lot of parties, and it was the song of the time, and it reminds me of all that stuff, sort of just having a lot of fun, to be honest, before being a parent. Not that it's not fun now.
Oh, so fun. Peppa Pig theme tune for me all the way.
Fun. Well, thank you so much. It's been so interesting to speak to you, and also I'm really looking forward to, good luck with the move. Adventures ahead, the new bike build. I'm looking forward to coming out to Spain and trying that bike with you.
Definitely.
Thank you.